Hello, everyone, and welcome to what are we, week 5 of the Inspire series, where we are talking about all things picture books. Our topic for this week is why are picture books that discuss diversity, inclusion, cultural differences, acceptance so important for the kids these days. With us, we have Michelle, Karen, and Josh again. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Our topic, very, very important topic, books on accepting who we are. I can think of lots and lots and lots to say about this, but we don't have all night, and I'm sure you guys can too. Michelle, can we start with you? Because I've published 3 of your books.
Yes.
Actually, more than 3. Yes. The Wind and the Mouse, the first one.
Yeah. That was the one that started it all, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I was actually approached by there were 2 amazing women who work with people who suffer from addiction. And what they were finding is it wasn't enough just to treat that person, that they had whole families that were being affected. So they came to me and they said, we want a resource that we can use with the kids, because the kids need to be able to understand what is happening. And I had already published My Brother Tom, which was a book I wrote for the older brother sisters of preemie babies, to give them a little bit of a idea about what's happening when they have got a little brother or sister in hospital. So I kind of already knew the power of using picture books as a tool for that kind of thing. But it really did cement for me just how amazing it is to be able to create something that's age appropriate, child friendly, but still entertaining, and how much it can actually do to help in the life of a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And you tackle quite a few areas. Just in the ones I've done, you've tackled friendship, kindness, change. Change is a really biggy one for kids.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Family, acceptance.
Yeah, acceptance.
Yeah.
I think it's a really great way that you can introduce things that maybe might be considered adult concepts. But if you're in a family, there's no such thing as an adult concept, because especially these days, kids are always watching, they're always listening, and to just ignore that and say, oh, they're kids, they don't need to know, I think is not only wrong, but it's also a bit scary that they're doing that, because we need to be empowering our kids with knowledge.
Yeah. And empowering is the word, Josh. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I was going to add that what Michelle was saying is that the books can be a fantastic catalyst to have the conversations between parent and child. So the parent can actually, because I know that parents have a lot of, I go, how do I bring up this topic? Or I know my child is struggling with this, or some family dynamic has changed and I don't know how to bring it up with the child. But a book can be that perfect catalyst. And there's actually one of the local libraries around here, Collie Library, has actually got a box. And it's like basically a parent can go up to this box and it's got all the books in there that deal with all important topics, whether it's self-acceptance or whether it's having a new baby and the older brother's worried about how the family's going to change, or anything like that. And the parent can go there, take the book out, and go have the conversation with the child. And I think that's the worry no more box. That's what it's called. And I just think that's a great idea. And that's how powerful these books can be that catalyst, can help that parent go, okay, this is not such a big thing that I need to get all angsty about. I just have the book, read it to the kid, and we have a conversation about it. I think that's the most powerful thing in that way.
Yeah, I love that it's called a worry no more box. That's just,
it's a great,
I don't know, that's just
great
brilliant.
idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Karen, you frequent your local library a lot? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, they have story time and they bring in a lot of diverse stuff that way. Because 1 in 2 Australians is born overseas. To what they're looking for, you're looking at books that help children, but there's also the other way of looking at it as diversity in books is having yourself represented in a book. And that's the way I look at it. I can think of a book that was really big in America, and that was Eyes That Kiss in the Corners. It was about a little girl and her mum and her grandma, and it was all about I have eyes that kiss in the corners like them and my little sister, and they were represented in a story when they would never have seen themselves in a book before. And then I think it is Scott Nicol or whatever, he's written My Shadow is Pink, because his son...
Scott Stewart. I love that. Yeah, love that book.
Name wrong. And he did that to help his son, but it's also been a way to bring awareness of that part of the community or children that are like that. So it's not necessarily even that the book's written, it will help a child, but so a child can see themselves represented. And that is why our Indigenous and Aboriginal books have become so important, and Magdabella Publishing got the Bologna Award, Publisher Award this year. There's respect that we're a multicultural society and there are lots of different nationalities reflected in our society, and they should, and also diverse children with special needs and all that. So books need to reflect everybody, not just one demographic.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, kids need to see their identity. They need to claim that, own it. And books, you know, it's such an empowering way to do it, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
When I wrote like Home, that's inspired by my family history, and it's a story that's unknown, but it's an important story about losing a home and finding a new one. But that story is unknown. But to anybody who has that heritage background or whatever, it's really important that that story is given a voice.
Yeah.
And a platform, and not be brushed under the carpet and not be forgotten because it's not topical, or some people say it shouldn't be told, you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it gives a voice to unknowns when you shouldn't be an unknown. Every voice should be equal. And that's why I think it's important, like, even though this book Michelle wrote is not a picture book, she's giving a voice to, and showing children who are like disabled and how they just want to be like everybody else, and they are like everybody else. They just got their functionality is different, and they just want to be the same, and they need that shown in books. So the change comes about in the thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you change it for children.
Yes.
Children are change makers. If you handle it correctly from a teaching perspective, when you teach a class, if everybody's the same, children see everybody as the same. And then if you bring the books in and you bring all the different stories in, what does it matter? We're all friends. We all love each other. We get along, and that's how it is.
Yeah.
I heard a teacher talking about, she asked a question I went and saw a play which talked about gender difference and stuff like that, and trans issues. And there was a primary school teacher in the audience, and she asked, this is like a Q&A at the end, and she asked, how do I introduce my kids in my classroom to these sort of topics, to say that the world's full of all these different interesting people? And the response was just to have a whole bunch of books in the classroom, just to normalize it, just to go, here's this book, here's that book, you know, things like, you know, have My Shadow is Pink is one of the books that's there, you know, just so they have read it to the class, have discussion, and that's right, and just normalize that and have a whole different range of books. And I thought that was just a simple, beautiful answer, and that shows the power of books to convey that.
And you have the reading shelf.
Yeah.
And when it's quiet reading time, if you've got a selection there of all different books,
Mm.
oh, any child can go and choose whatever story they like.
Yeah, exactly. So the
Yeah.
question is, how are these books then being brought into like school libraries and stuff? What's that process? Because I mean, I'm just thinking as we're talking here, if it's important for kids to see themselves in books, and that is absolutely vital, but we know with the publishing industry, that's all about the money. So, you know, if you have it narrowed down to a niche of a certain type of book, which is a certain type of character, and it's designed to be seen by someone, but it's not going to make, you know, not going to sell thousands and millions of copies, the choice of the publisher is then going to go, well, I'm not going to do that. So is that an issue? Do you guys see?
It is.
I think it, yeah. Sorry.
No. I'll just say one thing and I'll let you go. No, you go, Michelle.
I'm looking for a book. You go.
Otherwise, I can just
Be,
prattle on.
I think a good publisher doesn't go. I mean, they obviously have marketing, but first and foremost, it's always story.
It is,
Yeah. And that's my personal perspective as a publisher. I am very niche. I like these stories. I want these stories, you know, in all their diversity, in all their adversity. And I turn away perfectly good stories and say, maybe try this person. Nothing wrong with it. It's just not, I just want to hone in on these stories because, you know, I have a child who's neurodiverse. She's 31 now, but, you know, it was hard. I was a school teacher for 20 years, every year in the classroom. You know, you saw it, you dealt with it. And yet sourcing these books was really difficult at times, depending on the school where you're at. But yeah, so from my perspective as a publisher, that's what I purely like. It's all about the story. It's not so much about I'm going to make money from this. I just want that story told and out there. And that's my first priority. And I make that very clear to the authors who come to me. You know, be aware that it's not going to be a bestseller, but we can get it out there and we can keep publicizing it. And yeah.
I think it comes back to honoring the story. So when I wrote Noah Chases the Wind, it was a book with a little boy with autism. And I tried every single publisher that I could think of in Australia. And, you know, it was always the same response. We love the story, but it's too niche. Nobody's going to buy a book with a kid who's got a main character who has autism. And, you know, you could change it and take that element out. But that wasn't the heart of the story. The heart of the story was I wrote this for Noah, who's one of my best friends' nephews, and the story was he was worried about going to school, and his superpower is he could always tell when it was going to rain, and he still can. He's amazing. So I very well could have gone, oh, well, no publisher is going to publish it. It mustn't be a good story, but I just hadn't found the right home for my story. So with the resources that I had, I started looking into publishers overseas, and I found a US publisher and I sent it to them and they loved it. And they said, yep, absolutely. That's the type of book that we're looking for. So I think it's about, if you love your story and you know that it has value and worth, and to not give up on it and find your allies, find people who love your story as much as you. Yeah. And that's not just about stories with diversity, that's any sort of story, sort of story you want to get published. And then the same thing happened with Super Nicholas, because I wanted to honor Nicholas, who had passed away, and this is the story that he read of mine while he was in hospital. So I had the same feedback. We really love the story, but we don't want the main character to have Down syndrome because it's too niche and it won't sell. So I looked overseas and found a US publisher who said absolutely, but it took a little while to do that, and also finding the right illustrator. So finding someone who was willing to take on the challenges of a main character, and we worked really, really carefully with Nicholas's mum to make sure that we were representing him correctly and so representing the community, because I actually think when you are writing books about diverse topics, it is really important that you have some sort of lived experience, but also that you're representing the community authentically, because exactly like Karen said, these kids are going to be seeing themselves in these books. You want to make sure that you are doing the right thing and saying the right thing and doing an honest interpretation, not only so that they can recognize themselves and see themselves, but for people who use these books to learn about that community, that they're learning the right things and we're not endorsing stereotypes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Basic human need is to be loved and to be connected and accepted, and books are a pathway to show children we're all connected, we're all loved. If you can see yourself, if you would feel, imagine if you looked at you looked at 50 books and there was no representation of your culture or you there, you wouldn't, you'd sort of feel like, well, I'm not really accepted or loved or whatever. It's sort of, even if it's not recognized consciously, unconsciously, that message is still there. If you know, I think that's why they're looking for diversity now.
I mean, considering we all grew up with just this bland sort of layer of kids' books that were just all white people and just happy families and all that. When that wasn't representative of the actual world, and the world even now is even more different. So I just love that there are so many diverse books out there. You can go into a bookshop and you can, look under all the different categories and stuff like that. And I think that has changed so much from even 10, 15, 20 years ago. But it's like as a parent, how would a parent go find one of these books? If they've got a child that they think, I reckon I'm going to find a book that really relates, like whether it's Down syndrome, whether it's autism, whether it's Asian background or whatever, where do parents go? Because I don't have kids.
Their local library.
I think we need more advocates. I think exactly what Josh is saying is correct, because a lot of people don't know where to go. And as authors, we can only do so much, and we have such a quiet voice. Sometimes it feels like we're screaming into the void, especially when we are trying to compete with a lot of the mainstream titles that are out there. And like Jen said, like a lot of the times these books that we're creating is because we see a need, fill a need, not necessarily because it's going to be a money-making exercise. But I really do think that librarians and teachers are becoming our biggest advocates, and the more that kids aren't being read to at home and don't have access to books at home, that school is becoming the place where they're exposed to this. So I really think that teachers and teacher librarians are doing a fantastic job of raising the diversity in the literature that our kids are reading. But I also think as authors, we need to be advocates for our own stories and for the communities that we're representing, and that we do in some ways need to be a little bit of an ambassador when it comes to the stories that we are writing. That there's no point writing a story and knowing that it can do good, but then not doing the work that it takes to actually get that story into the hands of the kids who needs it. So I really do think that there is some responsibility on the author to make sure that they're doing whatever it takes to get that book into the hands of the people where it would do the most good.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's really, really important. If you write, you just can't go, oh, diversity's in now, I'm going to write a book to suit that. Like that just does not cut it. You've got to have some sort of connection to, like Michelle's connected to all of the stories she's written to. It's not just something she's made up. She's lived and felt those stories. My story is home is one that I felt. It's not something I've just fictionally made up. I have that. If you need to be authentic with your voice. It has to have authenticity. And even though we're good at creating and we're very creative, I think it's very sensitive area that if it's not your background and you don't have an affiliation with it, I don't think you should touch it.
It's an importance of own voices, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the word. Thank you.
Yeah. And I see that all the time with manuscripts that get sent to me. I guess I've just learnt over time, can just sense when the heart's in it and when it's not. And there's
one of the best advice I was given is nothing about us without us.
Yes.
So nothing about it. And also, just because you can write a story doesn't mean you should. Like everyone can write a story about whatever they want. That's fine. But should you be the person who is being the voice for that? Or should you empower somebody else who has more lived experience and give them the resources that they need to be able to share their own story?
Yeah. Josh, tell us a little bit more about your books. You touched on them a little bit last week. Have you got them there with you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first one, Being You Is Enough, which is the ultimate in self-acceptance, which is the book that I wrote for my 8-year-old self to let him know that he's okay. And I know I get reports from so many parents who have read this with their kids, and it's delivered the exact same message with the exact same intention. And even the parents have started to cry at the end because it's their last page. I don't think I showed it last week. And it says, and that you are loved.
Yeah.
And of course, so when they get to that point, like, what's the most important thing that a kid needs to know? And that you are loved. And then when the parent reads that, they goes, that gets me right here, gets me right in the feels. And that's what they want their kids to have and their kids to know.
Yeah.
So because I write all my books for myself, for my younger self, they have a level of authenticity, and then kids can detect what they want out of it. But with the latest book, How to Be a Wonder Hunter, though, because I spend a lot of time talking to a lot of neurodiverse kids, a lot of kids with disabilities and stuff like that, I wanted to really stress the point that anyone can be a wonder hunter, regardless of ability or anything, everyone. So that's why in this book, I was brave as an illustrator. We'll hark back to last week, where I tried to draw a kid in the wheelchair. I don't know if anyone's tried to draw a wheelchair, and they're really difficult to draw without looking like it was something straight out of a hospital, like something. So I just came up with my own idea of what a wheelchair would look like, and put flames and exhaust pipes on it and all that sort of stuff. But I wanted every kid to feel included, to feel they can be part of being a wonder hunter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's, I suppose, my enthusiasm for that comes across in the book, you know?
Yeah, it certainly does. And those books, do they carry through to your parenting programs? Because you run quite a few different parenting programs.
Well, I've got programs for that parents and kids can do together, video programs, and so those books marry up. So the content of each book marries up with the module of the actual program, so the kids can read the book and then they can watch the videos with the parents, and then have those discussions that arise out of doing that.
Yeah. Those really, really important discussions. Yeah.
Oh, it is.
What's the one with the cow on it? That's Tommy's favorite.
That's
that one. A cow in the moon. Yep.
That's it. It's okay to feel the way you do.
Yeah. Tommy loves that one. That's his favorite.
Well, I didn't realize it was such a game-changing book for a lot of parents to be able to talk to their kids about feelings and emotions.
Absolutely.
You know, because all I did, I wrote it from the point of view of, I'm talking to my 8-year-old self. How can I break it down really simply that my 8-year-old self can understand? And bang, there you go. And I just get so much positive feedback from that. Yeah. And of course, the illustrations, all the kids actually recreate them and do them better than I do.
Yeah. But they're all such important topics, aren't they? And they're just they're icebreakers for those conversations.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I
want to throw in something about, for me, it's about how do parents find these books? I mean, because I don't know, Karen, we all live in our little author bubble and writer bubble and all that, and we see each other's posts and we go, wow, there's so many great books out there. But if you're a mum or dad or your parent and you're sitting out there in the suburbs with a child that may be struggling or something, we can go to the library, we can go to there. But I think the Children's Book Council of Australia does a really great job in promoting a lot of diverse ranges of kids' books through their channels and through the awards, and especially through Book Week.
Yes.
That happens in August each week. And I think there's a lot of a little cheaty story. I'm going to promote my book again. There's a thing with unwritten rule with teachers now. If a kid comes to Book Week dress up day and they're not dressed up, either for whatever reason, mum can't be bothered, or they're poor, or whatever reason, a teacher usually has this handy, and the kid goes, "I've just come as myself."
Yeah.
And I thought that's the beauty. A few teachers have told me that. I just love that. I love that. But anyway, so I'm just, how do parents? We need parents to know these books are there.
Publishing houses are already making a difference because of their list and what they say, and their attitude has changed. It's evolving with the times, so that helps, especially when it's across the board and they're all doing it. And I do think, but there's a societal advantage and disadvantage depending on where you sit. If you come from a middle or upper class family, you usually have access to a library. Parents buy books, they read to you, they'll look for books that are culturally friendly about their family culture and also about other cultures, and they broaden the child's understanding of the world just by selecting those books without saying anything. And then I know from teaching in a lower socioeconomic school, those kids don't get anything. They don't even get the home reader read. They don't even get breakfast. So that's where things like books in homes, which I'm an ambassador for, are really important. And those kids get to select books and see different books where they normally wouldn't get anything. They wouldn't get a book bought for them. So the fact that they get to pick books and that they're given those books every term, they get a pack, it's phenomenal.
Wow.
So you do need organisations that do things like that. I'm not sure about book club. I know Scholastic run a book club from when I was teaching, but I don't know what the range was like, but it was usually the really popular ones. But I'd say they'd probably make their catalogue more inclusive as well. But also the school curriculum is now calling for more books.
Yeah.
So teachers need to be looking for them, and I think social media can play a place in that. But you've got to be there and you've got to have the time to look to find the books.
Yeah. And going back to what Josh is saying about parental access, bookshops. That's something we haven't talked about. I'm finding that they are getting more and more books, but still not enough. I know I go in and look as, depending on what I'm looking for, as a publisher or as a grandmother, or, and yes, they're there, but they're not at the forefront in bookshops.
No.
I don't, you guys have noticed that too? They're there, but they're hard to find. And, parents don't have time to go sifting through the shelves. We don't have time to go sift through the shelves. And unless you know the specific title of a book, this is just my experience, if you can't go to, the person running the bookshop and say, hey, have you got this? They often don't know. They're not educated themselves in.
It depends on if it's the owner or the person who orders the books or buys the books in. Usually they, but if it's just the junior staff or something, they're not affiliate or they're not a fay with what,
Yeah.
Point two is like in Shellharbour, we're now a city, and the only bookshop we have is the chain bookstore QBD. There is no independent bookstore in our city. So often parents will go and look for books in places like, we don't have Big W in our city, but it's in the neighbouring. It's in Warrawong, which is Wollongong. They can go to Big W, or they can go to Target, and you can get the book that will be $24.95 for a lot cheaper. But then when you look, the range is limited, and it is not diverse books. Usually, it is the commercial books.
Yeah. Do you find that, Michelle, because you go into quite a few different bookshops?
I think when you're going into a bookshop, the type of people who are coming in, you're already preaching to the converted in a way, because they are already walking into a bookshop. But I mean, the buying trends for books, especially since COVID and even before then, is 80% of people are buying online.
Yes.
So it's very, very rare that if somebody does go into a bookshop, either they're wasting time and they just want to have a look, or they're avid book nerds like us, and they're like wanting to go in and find a new book to fall in love with or support local authors. And I think independent bookstores are doing an amazing job of showcasing the work of local authors. So if the local author has written a book about diversity, then absolutely they do make sure that that's a feature. But I would love to see more of a shelf or a section in kids' books where it is books that specifically celebrate inclusion and diversity, and have that so that that's just a normal part of your shopping experience. But I do think that most of the time when people are looking for something, it's a Google search. So they will Google books about anxiety, books about, so we do need to be discoverable and have that sort of accessibility to make it really, really easy for parents. But also I think it comes back to educating parents that those sort of resources are available, because I still think, as a parent myself, and both me and my husband are self-employed, we've got to worry about rent and electricity and food and petrol, and we don't have money left over necessarily to go and buy books. So it's also having availability to the library, and really libraries taking ownership to say you can come, and not just books, but all sorts of resources for diverse kids are available in the library. They have signed story time, they have audiobooks, they have videos. I think we need to be, as authors, also being advocates for our local library to say that you can go in there, it's not going to cost you anything, and give them the support they need so that they can in turn support us, because librarians are all over this, like public librarians, they want more people to come into the libraries. They're making it more accessible, they're making it more inclusive, and we can hopefully have that mutually beneficial relationship with them.
Right, like the library, we're very fortunate where we live. Our libraries are amazing, and our libraries are doing a really good job. It's the only place a parent with young children can go and do something for free, whether it's to access books, access story time,
computers,
learn a new skill. They even have movie nights. So the library for our families here, a lot of our families, rather than buy a book, because money is tight for young families, is the library. So if you're in an area where the library is not much, or you've got to travel a long way to a library, your access is limited. And like Michelle was saying, you do need some online options, but then you've got to be proactive to look for that and have the time. And you will find people will fork out $5 for a coffee, but then when you're looking at the cost of a book, it's so much more. They'd rather go to the coffee shop for 4 or 5 days than buy a book. That's social. So the library really is a really important place, and for parents to recognise it. And I think once it gets known and it is free, and they can go up there and get support, they do embrace it.
Yeah, once the whole world opens up for them. And I
Yeah.
think it's just go to the library, ask the librarian, I'm looking for a book about this, and the librarian will find it for you. So I think that's one of the keys. We're answering my questions from earlier. Libraries,
Yeah.
school teachers, classrooms, all that. That is the way to get these diverse books into the hands of kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
kids can choose their own at the library too,
Yeah. Mm.
whatever it is. And you can't, you can see, oh, you might not like that one, but how do you know? The kids pick that up for some reason, whether they like it or not. It's for them to decide.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the power of a library, because the parents are still the gatekeepers with the purchasing.
Mm.
If you let the child go into the library, they're the ones picking their book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a parent can help, obviously, because, they can't pick a novel when they're 2. But you can say, look, over here in all of these books here, these are your picture book area or board book, and they can look. And they'll learn if they pick a book that's not right. They'll know not to pick it again if it's not right for them. They'll find another one.
Yeah.
It's all to do with selecting, finding.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do that with Tommy, Michelle?
Absolutely. We're big library frequenters, but now at school as well, they borrow at school, and they've got a really good structure at school. So they borrow 3 books per week. They have one which is a learning extension book, so one that's a little bit above kind of their reading, one just for fun, and then one that they leave at school in their desk, and that's their kind of quiet time reading. So I think that's done really well. But going back to the inclusion as well, the other thing that I wanted to say before we run out of time, when we were talking about own voices and nothing about us without us, I think another really good thing that we can do, especially as authors when we are visiting schools, is make sure we are visiting special schools. And Josh does this so well, and he really should be the person that I'm going to be directing this question at. But I think there's a missed opportunity when we are doing school visits, that we will go and do workshops with all sorts of kids, but there's this thing, like, especially like when we're working with nonverbal kids, so the kids at Narberthon State Special School, like I'm the only author who's actually done a school visit there over the last, I don't know how many years, because it's just not on people's radars. And I think we need to make sure as authors, when we are going and we are offering our services, that we are offering our services to everybody across the board, because it doesn't matter if they're nonverbal, if they are visually impaired, if they're on the spectrum, they still have a right to learn how to express themselves and to share their own story. So I think inclusion and diversity is twofold. It's making sure, like Karen said, that we are representing these kids as authors and they are seeing themselves in books, but also the flip side of that is we are teaching these kids that they have a voice, and we are helping them share their voice so that they're the ones who end up being the storytellers. And Josh, how have you been kind of encompassing that in everything you've been doing?
I suppose I just take whatever comes, really, and whichever way. I mean, like, say, for example, last year during school holidays, I got invited by the Muscular Dystrophy Association to do an incursion. So I had a whole bunch of kids, and I just did my normal school thing that I do at schools. And because it's such an inclusive exercise and all that sort of stuff, it was great. It went down fantastic. And they said, wow, it's so good to have something different for these kids. And but it's like, I went to one of the Indigenous schools locally last year as well. But I think you're right. There's actually more opportunities to actually approach other schools that may not otherwise have an author visit or something like that, and actually do that. Go take these messages into those schools. And I think that's a great idea. I mean, there was one organisation last year in Perth that, with kids' speech developmental disorder, I went and spoke to them, and then they were the most excitable bunch of year 2s I have seen in my life, and they were so excited. But it's like, for me, I don't care who I talk to.
No.
I've got a simple message. My Being You Was Enough message that I take to all the kids, no matter who they are, what walks of life. It's just remembering. You might do this, Michelle, when you've got the little microphone thing for one of the students who might be hearing impaired, is to turn it off at the end of the session. Otherwise, you walk out and you go, gee whiz, and you and some poor girl there is going.
And also, it's not just schools. I've done Kids Wish here is a local charity, and it's for kids with special needs, and they host a Christmas party every year. And just before COVID lockdown, they had a big one at Symbio, the animal park. And so I did it for free, because I have all my paperwork and clearance. And so I did the animal park, and I was the author. So I read the story,
Cool.
I did the actions, and then it was really nice because a lot of the kids really like my bit as much as the animals. So I was like, that's pretty cool. So you can do nice, and you can do things like I got an email from Michelle about another author whose children go to a small school, and they've got a small library with no books, asking if fellow authors could donate books. So I sent off a book today, and the anthology one, Michelle, to that girl for her school.
For Kelly, yeah.
Yeah, like you can do nice things that way. And if I'm an ambassador for a disadvantaged school for books in homes, I always send a copy of my book to them. And
Yeah,
I know we don't have money to burn, but I'm passionate about literacy and children having access to those books. And I'm thinking, well, you wouldn't know me from a bar of soap if I'm just there talking, and I could be just saying I'm an author. At least if you've got one of my books, you know that, I'm fair dinkum and this is what I do, and I'm broadening your world by just sharing my book, or I can gift another book by another author. And I also do things like I've got my third bundle ready to go up to the Newland Comprehensive Cancer Clinic at Prince of Wales for children undergoing cancer treatment. So I just take up a box of books when I go up there myself, and I donate the books, and I just go, these are for any kids having treatment. And I don't,
Nice.
and he goes, you don't have to do this. I go, I know, but I want to.
Yeah.
And then that I'm happy. I feel like if that makes somebody smile for that day and helps them get through what they've got to get through that day, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Even if the book's only read once or twice, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So,
and Michelle, I remember you reading to little Premi babies.
Yeah, that was pre-lockdown, pre-bloody COVID. We with Life's Little Treasures Foundation, we went into we went hospitals in Brisbane and Sydney and Melbourne, and that was about raising awareness for parents who have just had preemie babies about the importance of reading to them from birth. So that was actually it was really hard for me because I'm the mum of 3 preemie babies, and then going back into special care nursery, I was like, flashbacks, you just wait until I get home. Like, I don't have time. I don't have time for this rush of PTSD to happen. But it was really great because I think as parents, you don't know what you don't know. And like Josh was saying, it's about empowering parents with these tools and resources that they can use to then initiate conversation. And as parents, like, there's so much happening and there's so much information, and then where do you go to actually find that sort of stuff? So aligning yourself with organizations who match your story and who are aligned with your values is another really great way, I think, of being able to reach these kids who don't always have access through mainstream stuff.
Yeah, and their parents want to know that they're getting the same as what the other kids are getting, basically the same opportunities. But there's also what's her name, Tabitha, the Forever Ability Awards, and now there's recognition for books that fill the niche. And they're giving out, like, Tabitha, it's Tabitha, isn't it? She's created this award
And she's also got a resource on her website as well. So that's a really good website to go to. And it has all the books listed under categories.
So you don't necessarily, if you find her and the awards, that's bringing recognition to those books and who they target and what they're for. And then if she's got all the resources listed, that's a place a parent can go as well.
Yeah.
So are changing slowly.
They are slowly, but I guess it's going back to Josh's point of how do parents find out about her? Like, we know about her.
Yes, that's the tricky bit.
But, you know, how do we get parents to reach out to her? Like, and that, you know, and it's quite complex when you think about it. You know, we may know about, you know, your little treasures and what you do as an ambassador, Karen, and your books, Josh, but parents on board. Yeah, that's the really tricky part, and educating them.
Maybe if anyone's watching, if they've got some tips and tricks.
I was going to say
absolutely, please, because
put the comments down below.
Yeah, I'll be like Tommy. Comment down below. I think this is initiating maybe a different discussion that we might need to tack on to one of our author talks. Is really about marketing and promotion and how to make sure that we are supporting each other as authors and writers, and what can we do to help other people and in turn help ourselves get our books into the hands of people who need it. I think it's probably a separate discussion because it's not just about books that specifically deal with niche issues and inclusion and diversity. I think it's a struggle as an author. It doesn't matter who you are, trying to get our books seen and have our message heard. It is a whole other topic.
And it's a whole other topic, yeah.
I'm going to need either a coffee or a gin if we're going to talk about that. That is not something I can talk about right now.
It's nothing to do with the quality of the writing or the story. It's all to do with exposure and marketing.
So I mean, I think it needs to be another topic, but if anyone watching has got some ideas, especially around how we reach those kids who are not represented and who, especially our books that are a fit for those kids, if anyone has got any ideas or comments, I would love them to be able to share that, and maybe we can address it as well in another week's talk.
You've done something really good, Michelle, with like you're affiliated with the Premature Baby Association, and so you've risen the profile of your books and awareness of your books through being associated with that. So if you do write for something, you can find maybe an association connected with it, and you can also help become their brand, but they're helping you as well. Because it goes both ways.
Yeah.
You know? And gorgeous publishers like Jen. Like, where would we be without her? Like, I would not have been able to reach all of these kids that I've been able to reach if Jennifer and Daisy Lane Publishing hadn't been advocates for filling that niche. And it's very much about the way that Jen structures the portfolio of Daisy Lane Publishing is see a need, fill a need, and we need more publishers like Jen.
Yay.
And I thank you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, because there are not very many places. I mean, what Josh does is amazing with his blend of independently published and traditionally published books, and always with a focus on what's best for the kids, and just having advocates like you that can help, it really does make a difference. And we can write all the stories we want, but unless we have publishers like you, then we can't get them into the hands of the kids who need them. So I really do applaud you and thank you so much.
No, that's the focus for me is purely on the kids and what I see and what their needs are, and all those heartfelt stories that we need out there.
Daisy Lane
Yeah.
Publishing, see a need, fill a need. That's the motto.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so okay, I think we might wrap it up on that note. It's another topic where we can talk for hours. Very complex topic, once again, one where there's no real answers, and I'd love to know, like you said, drop in the comments below if anyone has any ideas, any advice on how we can bring more access to parents, and more access to bookshops, and everything we've talked about, because it's so important, particularly these days, to have these stories told and shared, and stories that come from your heart, and that comes through in your words. So thank you, everyone. Next week we are talking about week 6. We're almost through to the end. Week 6. What can picture books teach us as adults? What can we as adults learn from them? So that's next week's topic. So that's another interesting one. So thanks, Josh. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Karen. Anyone who's watching and can offer us any tips, please let us know, and we'll chat again next week.
Thank you.